This pivotal year in American politics also coincides with the anniversary of the nation's largest single advance in voting rights, that is, women's suffrage. On the heels of an outpouring of mail-in votes, the Handel and Haydn Society will mark the occasion with a streaming concert November 8th at 3 p.m. The program will celebrate the achievements of queer women, women of color, and women of Boston. To tell us what's planned are two guests from Handel and Haydn, programming consultant and countertenor Reginald Mobley, and one of the instrumentalists, Julia Scott Carey. Thank you both very much for joining us.
Yes.
Reggie, I'd like to ask you about what this year means in a whole series of concerts for Handel and Haydn, because this isn't just a one-off occasion. You've got this whole sort of almost serial inclusion that you're doing with these concerts. So what about the concept for this year?
The concept for this year is that we're modifying the way we've always done the Every Voice concert. So it's because of the significance of this year, we get kind of a very special episode of Every Voice. The few years before, we've always focused on various aspects of the community of Boston. I think of a community in the same way I think of a gestalt, in that the sum of parts is, this whole is greater than the sum of parts. And I thought, my conceit is that the whole is better served and better strengthened by really understanding the various parts that exist. And so for the past few years, in our concerts, we focused on individual communities of Boston, the Black community, the queer community, Latinx, veterans and suffered past wars, in the Jewish community, and many others. And the idea is that we just do small vignettes of each individually together and then kind of link them. This year, we're doing that again, but instead, we're actually focusing on the women in these various communities. So we're focusing on queer women and identifying. We're focusing on women of color as composers, and as well as significant composers, female composers who are have lived in Boston. And what that does in marrying the two is that it also shows the distinct intersectionality that exists within the community of women, the wider community of women. And so that's hopefully what we will showcase, and you'll see a lot of that in this concert this year.
Julie, can you tell me a little bit about some of the music that you're going to be playing and the people who created it?
Yes. So probably the best known composer that I'm playing of my solo piano works is Amy Beach. And she was actually a composer from Boston. And she was the first American female composer to have a symphony performed by a major orchestra. The Boston Symphony Orchestra performed some of her work while she was alive. And so it's a short piece of hers I'm playing. And it sounds very improvisatory and free, but it's quite a beautiful composition. Reggie chose some amazing repertoire for this concert. I'm very excited to be presenting all of it.
Reggie, I think one of the other discoveries, Amy Beach is fairly well known, at least in Boston, but Isabel Leonardo, a contemporary of Arcangelo Corelli, but other than that, I never heard of her before. How did you find her?
Oh, that's so sad, Chris, because everyone should know her name. She's incredible. Isabel Leonardo, she was an Ursuline nun, and she was born in Novara, Italy, and was entered into the convent very early. And at that time, many of the nuns were basically the daughters of wealthy families who, slyly entered their daughters into into service to God, so because it was much cheaper than marrying off their daughters with a huge dowry. It was a thrifty way of retaining your wealth if you went that path. But Leonardo just flourished. She was an incredible musician. She and also an incredible nun. She became Mother Superior and Consigliere, and she was just prolific. She in between with a 60-year period, she published 4 complete volumes of her music. She was the most prolific female composer probably since as well. And the fact that she published her last volume when she was 80. I mean, she wrote more, and she was known for doing these incredible styles. And I think she was actually the first person to publish an instrumental sonata. Like she did so much that, and she was just forgotten because the way we kind of moved in canonization is that we really just focused on male composers. We really discounted the amazing contributions to classical music and westernized music that women have done for so long. But once you hear her music, you see an influence and a style that really kind of spread around Europe, and you begin to see that we've kind of done a disservice not just to her and to other female composers, are composers of color, but we've done a disservice to ourselves by being so short-sighted in the way we've canonized just a few composers and haven't really given a chance for people to really see the incredible works that exist out there by other composers that aren't Bach or Mendelssohn.
Julie, I want to ask you about some of the works that involve a mixture of piano and vocal in this program, and the works of Florence Price. Anything our viewers should know about her?
Yes, absolutely. So Florence Price is another person who is has ties to Boston, because she actually attended the New England Conservatory. And at the time that she applied there, she said she was Mexican because it wasn't considered acceptable back then for an African American to attend the New England Conservatory. So she's become much better known recently. A lot of people are performing her works, and her art songs are gorgeous. And a number of them set poems by Langston Hughes. And some of them are arrangements of spirituals, like traditional African-American spirituals. And she has a very romantic style in her writing, especially her piano parts, which can be quite florid and elaborate. So I love performing Florence Price's music. I actually added it up a few days ago, and I've performed 15 of her songs in virtual concerts since the pandemic started, so in the last few months.
Reggie, talk about this, because you got Amy Beach sort of absorbing things, influences of Brahms or something like that, and then you've got Florence Price, Langston Hughes. Florence Price, she has one foot in the tradition of spirituals, the other in the Harlem Renaissance. Isn't that really what intersectionality is all about too?
It is, but it's more than that too. It shows kind of the path that we could have taken. When we think of, I think Florence Price, to me, is an acclamation of all that has come before, because she is, well, what I was going to say is, when you think of Negro spirituals and slave songs, and what was created here by Black people centuries ago, this is kind of, for us, this was the beginning of American music. This was inherent, this was native to here, native to us. And not just that, but in that way, that is truly Negro songs, slave songs, spirituals. This is American early music. And where it, because of racism and many other things, it found its evolution. It evolved through ragtime and blues and jazz and rock and pop and other commercialized styles that we listen to now, outside of the classical sphere. But because of the lack of access and because of racism, it wasn't allowed to also follow the path of serious music. Classical musicians in the States didn't really respect or are really treated as as a music that was really ours. And so it was left to kind of, be promoted by certain composers like Dvorak and others, but we didn't really see what the potential was of those styles as kind of an advanced evolution through the filter of classical music or westernized classical music, that until we see it with Florence Price. Like, it comes to a head there. It's seeing the melding of, Viennese styles and early European styles, German styles of writing and composition, like art songs, but also what the potential of from slave songs and spirituals and themes like that. Like, it really comes together with her, and she did it brilliantly. She truly belongs at the top of the canon, alongside composers like Bach and Beethoven and Brahms because of what she did.
Julia, there are also works in this program by contemporary female composers, but at the same, and right now that's not unusual for a classical performance these days. But at the same time, when you look back at some of the people like Florence Price or Isabella Leonardo, people who were in obscurity, and you're sort of plucking them out of obscurity, how does that feel to you?
So I love playing obscure music personally. I've always kind of specialized in new music and very old music. I play in a new music ensemble in Boston where we do works just by living composers almost all the time. And so it's something that's very exciting to me. But there's a reason people like Beethoven and Brahms were famous, and I would never say anything against their music because I love playing it. It's gorgeous, but it's not the only music that's out there. There's so much repertoire out there, and discovering something new, especially by someone who comes from a group that's traditionally underrepresented in the classical music world, it can be very, very exciting. And being able to present that music to an audience and just see their reactions when they discover something new is also a really rewarding experience.
And finally, Reggie, if people want to catch the stream concert or maybe find it again after it's been performed live, what's the best way for them to do that?
To head to the Handel and Haydn Society website, and they'll be able to find the link to sign up to see the streaming concert on Sunday. And they'll also be able to read all the program notes that have been created for this. We have one of our talented singers, Elise Groves, who wrote incredible program notes that talks about the composers and the celebration of women's suffrage.
Well, thank you both very much for taking time to be with us.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah. That was Reginald Mobley and Julia Scott Carey from the Handel and Haydn Society.